In this episode, we're talking chapters 34, 35, and 36 from The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. So Rand and Mat have finally made their way to Caemlyn. They arrived at the Queen's Blessing. They learn a little bit more about Thom, and Rand meets a very interesting non-human friendly character in the library.
Hello and welcome to the Doctors Who podcast. My name is Chris.
My name is Chip.
My name is Brian.
And today, my audio is actually working. We tested it like 3 times. Because if you watch the previous video, so Mr. Bishop was the one who very quickly watched the video and then was like, hey, I'm sure whatever you were saying was interesting, but I can't freaking hear you. So we pulled it. I did some redubbing and some overlaying of audio, and it looks like a badly overdubbed movie. So here we are.
It's all good.
So we've got chapters 34, 35, and 36, which are all Rand and Mat chapters. So before we jump into our individual thoughts, I will remind everybody that we do have a presence out on Patreon, and you can find that link below. Not only do you get access to these episodes early, there's also a lot of behind-the-scenes content. There's some outtakes and bloopers. There's some after-show discussions that we do that kind of get into some topics that we didn't have time for here. And also you get some physical swag, whether that's stickers or, if you throw enough of your hard-earned money at us, you get, something like a wooden dice tray or a 3D print for the book that we're actually reading. So there's some cool stuff out there. You can check the description below if you're interested. All right, plug done. Chip, let's go.
Not really a lot of action happening here, but it's really moving Rand and Mat closer to Caemlyn. So they kind of mysteriously, they're in Carysford, I think we said, and they sleep in some haystacks, and then they kind of overhear this conversation where a Fade is just out there talking to a couple of men. They don't seem to realize what he is, which is kind of interesting, but when he leaves, they find a ride and basically, stow in the back of a wagon until they get to Caemlyn, where this guy drops them off. And the big thing there is that, again, Mat and Rand, they've seen, they know the Two Rivers, they know Emmons Field, they've seen Barillon, they saw Shadar Logoth, they saw Whitebridge. Now Caemlyn dwarfs all of them. It's just massively huge, and just they have a hard time just processing the size of it. So I don't know if it's like when I first visited Chicago and it's like coming from a smaller town in Iowa, it's like, holy cow, this is big. How did they build all this stuff? So a couple of hayseeds from Iowa going to Chicago was kind of like Rand and Mat going from Emmons Field to Caemlyn. There's a lot of exposition here and a lot of things. We learn a lot about Thom. We learn that he was a court bard, that he had some sort of a relationship with the Queen. We don't know the details on that, but he left to help his nephew. He came back, and they basically ran him out of town. And then we also meet the Ogier Loial, and I think he's another just kind of a fascinating character that, when the way that he's introduced, and he's just this monstrously huge figure, but he's incredibly gentle and well-spoken and intelligent and well-read, and the kind of tidbits of knowledge that he drops on Rand during this conversation. There's a lot of exposition there. There's a lot of valuable things that we learn, but the interaction between the two and that kind of budding friendship that they have is really, really interesting to me.
So these chapters were interesting. Again, as Chip said, for a lot of the exposition reasons, we get to know a little bit more about kind of how Mat's doing with this whole process. Mat's really kind of going through a downtime, and it's nice to see kind of these ebbs and flows. These characters are a lot more relatable when they have these emotions that are just like, I'm tired of running. I'm just gonna sit here on this bridge until you tell me where we're going. And then they get to Caemlyn, and they go through that interaction with the Fade and on the cart, and it's like, well, who can they trust? It just has that overwhelming sense of everywhere. And then they talk about the rats in the town, and the rats, if we remember back to that dream, it just kind of has this foreboding feeling like there is something building, and they're the guards, but the Whitecloaks, just all of these things kind of in play. It really is kind of building up towards something. And so I think this is all a vehicle to get us to Jordan's next kind of stop along Matt and Rand's trip. But I really did like the addition of Ogier, and I wasn't sure how to pronounce it, if it was Ogier or Ogier, or we can maybe discuss that later. But it was a really interesting add-in, because I think we're going to get a little bit more of the history and a little bit more depth with this, and I thought that was well played on how they added that, how I think they're going to add that character to the party. So I'm curious to see where it goes from here.
So one of the things we talked about, last episode with Rand and Matt was trust. They kept getting ambushed by Darkfriends, and even farmers that maybe had intentions that were well-meaning, they had problems trusting because they didn't know who could be a Darkfriend. So for them to stumble across a Fade and presumably a Darkfriend hatching this plot to say that, we're looking for two farm boys who stole a heron-marked sword from so-and-so, and they're offering a reward, and, it just kind of, I think, reinforces this sense that they're on their own. And so I think this theme kind of evolves, right? They get to Caemlyn, and they're completely overwhelmed because of the size. And they finally make their way to the Queen's Blessing, where Thom told them to try to get to if they could get to Caemlyn, and talk to Master Gil. And after telling them that they're friends with Thom, and Master Gil, recognizing Thom's flute, he's like, okay, come on, I'm going to give you some food. I'm going to give you some beds to sleep in. Tell me what's wrong. And so they tell this kind of watered down version of what happened. So this is really the first time they felt safe enough or trusting enough to really open up to somebody since Thom. I mean, they've just been on the run and they've been scared. So this almost provides, I think, an anchor for them. And then to Chip's point and to Brian's point, Loial, or however you say his name, just has this completely disarming kindness and innocence to him. And before you know it, Rand is opening up about everything, including the Trollocs and the Fade, and the whole works. And what I really like here, and I'd like to discuss this here in a second, is Loial refers to them as Ta'veren. So that was kind of like an evolution for me of the trust issues from the last section, and now them starting to come out of that and finding people that they feel that they can rely on and they can trust. So there we go.
Yeah, I totally meant to talk about the Ta'veren aspect of it. I think that was, in my opinion, one of the big reveals here.
Yeah.
At least for me, because up until this point, I kind of felt the main person who recognized the abilities of these teenagers.
Yeah.
We know that Balsamon is still lurking. He knows they're important too, but this is the first time that we noticed that a non-Aes Sedai can recognize them for what they are.
So I'm gonna just read a little bit out of the book if I can.
Mm-hmm. Is this the first mention of Ta'veren as the word, as to this is what they are?
I believe so.
No, that
to my
they
knowledge,
said they're previously it's been their part of the pattern, they're part of the weaving of the wheel, but this is the first time that said no, this is what you are. Mm-hmm. And the way that it explains them is they're threads, and they kind of have these fixed things that they don't really have a lot of maneuvering that they can do, that they're really fixed into the pattern as to what they are and what they're going to be.
Yeah, he really explains it pretty well, because he says how the wheel of time weaves the pattern of ages, and the threads it uses our lives, and they're not fixed. A man can change the direction of his life if the pattern has room for it. He said, but sometimes the change chooses you, or the wheel chooses it for you. And sometimes that wheel bends a life thread or several threads in such a way that all the surrounding threads are forced to swirl around it, and those forced threads, and those still others, and on and on. So that's kind of how he is describing that, which I thought was, it was a good mental image to be like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. But let's...
Well, that whole image, though, of the threads weaving across each other and creating this world and this life, and you're one of these threads. It's like you can easily kind of picture your own life and how, the decisions you've made have impacted people around you. You've met people, you've moved away, you've met new people, and that you've really created this whole pattern in your own life. So it's really a great way to describe kind of who they are and how this world works.
So. So let's go back to Min. We haven't talked about Min for a while, but her visions, like when she looks at people, and she sees all these things when she looks at Rand, Matt, and Perrin, right? About how the darkness is closing in and they're like warding it off. So that kind of like ties in, I think, to this, right? And
absolutely.
This is me having read it and knowing, but trying not to be like, this is what happens, and this is what she does, and this is what this means. I don't want to do that. First of all, I don't want to do it to Brian. That would be mean. And secondly, if we have people watching that are like Brian, just reading this for the first time, then it would be mean to them as well. So be kind. Rewind. I feel like if you're under 35, you maybe don't understand that reference.
If you watch the last blockbuster on Netflix, you'd get it.
Fair. Yeah. So the Ogier are interesting. They almost remind me of Ents in a way. Maybe.
It's just such a different. Yeah, it just has like this sort of mythical vibe to it, but I don't know. Like, okay, so one of the funny parts for me in this section was Rand is like, man, this guy's old. He's super old. He's even older than Sen Bui, and I don't even know how old he's supposed to be. Was he one of the elders in Eamon's Field?
Yeah, he was the asshole.
Yeah, but
that's right.
But if Loial's 90.
90, right? That's what he said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere, and it may not have said it here, but an Ogier's lifespan is like 4 times that of an average human. So he'd be like early 20s, in human terms. But...
Yeah, but he talks about how humans, they act so impulsively and like seemingly recklessly, and and it just reminded me of the slow, deliberate nature and like the mannerisms of Treebeard when he's talking to Merry and Pippin, and so that was it. Wasn't so much of a visual reminder of just like some of the opinions and mannerisms, I think. So.
Yeah, but there's some things that happen in the later books too with the Ogier that remind me of the Entmoot, and some they had these long conversations that, because they even said it in this section where they have like stump meetings or whatever they call them that last days.
Sounds like corporate America.
Yeah, a half a day.
Yeah,
right.
Feels like it. Ouch.
Half a day meetings. Woof.
Half an hour meetings are too much most days.
This could have been an email.
Yeah, but I think
the thing I like too is that I think
I
was gonna say Loial's really our first non-human character that's a friendly. I mean, other
Yeah.
than the wolves, but we really don't know a lot about the wolves.
Yeah.
But we haven't met a lot of non-human characters other than the Trollocs, the Fades, whatever that was in Shadar Logoth, but everything else has been kind of the baddies. But here, the first impression is like, holy shit, it's a Trolloc. But
Mm-hmm.
he's like, why do you humans always do that? You guys just don't get it. And then he looks at his face, and it's a friendly face, just this big eyes and bushy eyebrows and tufts of hair, and it just, and that, like you said, or in your hot take, that it's really Rand just kind of melts and opens up and just kind of says everything that's happened, and feels comfortable doing so.
They also have extremely long memories because Rand's like, oh, I'm from the Two Rivers, and like, I don't know where that is. He's like, well, somebody told me it used to be called Menetherin, and he's like, it's like, oh, basically, like, oh shoot, I'm sorry for your loss, like thinking that would still be fresh on Rand because so it's like, well, it was a while ago. I'm good.
And then there's a lot of little tidbits of foreshadowing here. So he refers to Rand as an Ailman, which Rand's like, no, I'm from the Two Rivers, and he's like, oh well, my apologies. I didn't realize, I wasn't thinking. And then the other one is the mention of the ways, which is a great plot device later to get people to places quickly, but the way that it's introduced here is kind of interesting too, because then you realize that there's something not quite right with them, but that it kind of starts to open up that, so if these allow you to travel quickly, then maybe others have been using it too.
Well, and it's interesting. You mentioned Loial confusing him for one of the Aiel. And if you think back to the rest of the book, like, Jordan always makes a point to say that Rand is taller than everybody else, and he has this flaming red hair.
Hair is kind of a reddish.
I think his eyes are gray, and just like he has these traits and characteristics that are uncommon in the Two Rivers, and everybody kind of attributed that to his mother Carrie being from outside the village. But interesting thing to just kind of keep in the back of your head. So, yeah.
Man, but what a truth sayer. I really liked him because he was kind of a straight shooter. I think really the cook owns this inn because she kind of controlled the innkeeper a little bit, and I thought that was pretty poignant. Just that he really kind of ignores social cues, sort of, but he's just going to tell you things how they are. And I think this is a nice character trait, because we talked about so much deception with, how everyone feels about the Aes Sedai, about Tar Valon. And then you have someone here who is so seemingly innocent, who's just saying it straight.
Sure.
And I think it's a nice character to add into this complex world. Yeah. So I think he's a fun character.
Yeah, and I like how he's always like journaling and keeping notes, and he's writing. So once he realizes that Rand is a Ta'veren, he's like, well, can I just travel with you? Can I go with you? And it's like, most of them, Rand, everybody else is kind of put into this position, but I think Loial sees it for what it is, and it's like, I kind of want to be a part of this.
Well, and he does it fully aware of the danger they're in too.
Oh yeah.
So, it's interesting that in this set of chapters, after all of the running and the run-ins with Darkfriends, we find two people in the span of pages that Rand and Matt can feel safe with and confide in. So it was nice, because a lot of bad things happened to them through this last chunk of the book, and for them to actually be in a place where they have people that they can trust again is kind of nice to read.
Yeah, and kind of paralleling this to what we'll talk about next week. We'll catch up with Nynaeve and Perrin and Egwene, and they actually have a few good things happen to them by the end of the next section as well. So things are starting to look up a little bit.
So right.
Not for long.
So next time we will be covering chapters 36 and 37, and those are Nynaeve and then Perrin and Egwene from a point of view perspective.
I think it's 37 and 38.
What did I say?
Yeah, 30.
Son
You
of
said
a-
36,
You're
37.
right.
37, 38. I know we talked about this a lot today. I mean, this
I'm
this
so
is
confused.
that's
All right. Yes, 37 and 38. Jeez.
probably those corporate stump meetings
It
that you've
is.
been dealing
That's
with. They're like
totally
days
it.
long.
Yeah. So thank you very much for tuning in. If you made it through the last episode, thank you. You deserve some sort of a prize, I think. If you like this one, please click that thumbs up. Please like the video. That does help us out. Also, please use the comment section. Let us know what you thought of these sections or if you have any questions for us. And we do ask that if you like this, you do subscribe and you hit that bell notification because every time we post new content, you will get notified. And once again, we do have the link to our Patreon down below. So please, if you are interested and are in a giving mood, check that out. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Alonzi.